Texas passes law that bans abortion as early as 6 weeks. Okay, this is horrendous. Okay, on May 19th, Texas Governor Greg Abbott signed into law a bill that outlaws any abortion following 6 weeks of pregnancy, specifically as soon as a cardiac activity is recognized within the fetus. Many women are unaware that they are even pregnant within that period. This bill, which takes effect in September, makes no exception for pregnancies resulting from rape or incest. Additionally, and this is one of the most messed up parts of it, the bill includes a rare provision that allows citizens to sue anyone that they believe may have helped a pregnant individual violate the ban. That provision, yes. That provision cannot be used against pregnant people, but it can be used to target abortion providers and abortion rights activists. Elisabeth Smith, the Center for Reproductive Rights Chief Counsel of State Policy and Advocacy, stated that Texas is inviting anti-abortion protesters to police abortion clinics and harass providers, even though the state knows that these bans are unconstitutional.
What this reminds me of, that individual citizens can say, oh, Mrs. Jones down the street helped so-and-so get an abortion. Therefore, it's like some of these blasphemy laws in Pakistan or in other countries where people accuse other people of having done something that they perceive to be wrong, and the government accepts just anyone's accusation and then acts on it with, sometimes no proof at all, or it becomes a tool for retribution, or I don't like this person, so I'm going to, because being sued could wreck your life. The cost of the legal fees, the reputation damage that you could have, all of these things. And so it just really reminds me of this, anybody on the street can say, oh, so-and-so isn't, I heard them say such and such about Muhammad, or your skirt is too short, therefore you're violating this, provision in the Quran. So now I'm going to turn you into the morality police. I find it really very similar to that. And then I also find it really abhorrent that the state government of Texas is purposely creating bills that they know will not hold up in court, that will not be able to be enacted, in order to use taxpayers' money to force some sort of Supreme Court challenge. And so there's all this talk about, activist judges or activist politicians, but this is pure activism with the citizens of Texas's money. They're taking their money to advance a particular agenda that only benefits certain ideologues that they know they can't actually enact. So they're wasting all this money to fight something in court that they know they'll lose.
Yeah, so when I was reading about this, one pro-life activist describes this and also the actions that are being taken across states across the country as carefully, she used the words, it is a carefully crafted arrow to basically end Roe v. Wade. So across the country, there are many states who are crafting laws, to Rivka's point, purposefully to go through the court system to try to battle Roe v. Wade. For those who don't know, that is what established protections for abortion across the country. And what is so terrifying about this is the way of this provision that allows everyday citizens to take these lawsuits into their hands. It's a way, basically the intent is, or the effect at least, is to allow citizens to use judicial harassment against people who either help people gain abortions or people who fight for abortion rights. Because This is a very good way for abortion rights organizations to drain their resources on judicial harassment.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because they're taking that old legal saying about every lawsuit has a nuisance value, and that's exactly what's going on here. But to actually be fair to the point that I made, I have to check myself about creating things purposely to challenge Supreme Court. That is actually a tactic that these people have learned from liberals and progressives, because they did a lot of that during the civil rights era to force specific discriminatory laws or to, a challenge. So I do have to acknowledge that this is something that has been done before, and it's not specifically some out of the blue, out of left field thing. And I think that a lot of these folks on this particular mindset have actually used and learned from a lot of the tactics that some of progressives used, which was one of them was to force court challenges. But yeah, the idea of individual citizens can now use the legal system or the civil court, because it will be civil, so the tort system, to enact their own form of revenge or nuisance or going after people in order to basically have this nuisance value, this draining of coffers. And it's interesting too that they're saying sue rather than bring charges, because the burden of proof in civil court is much lower than the burden of proof in a criminal court. So all you need to prove is preponderance of evidence rather than reasonable doubt. So the neighbor saw this woman drive the girl who was pregnant somewhere in the city in the range of where the abortion clinic is. And then the girl didn't have a baby. So, there it is. Preponderance of evidence. Mrs. Jones owes an individual. So what's the remedy, right? She owe damages to some person who has absolutely nothing to do with what happened with regard to this pregnant woman or her assisting her? So you have to pay damages to just some individual person who's now turned you into the Stasi?
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. And like I said, this goes into effect in September. But so someone was pointing out in the live chat that it's a trigger law, so that if it's currently unconstitutional. So with the case that we talked about last week that is in regard to a ban that was being fought through the courts in Mississippi, which is going to go before the Supreme Court in October, should anything about the status of Roe v. Wade or various aspects to the law that may or may not make it apply federally, laws like this are on the books in these states on the state level so that they can go into effect as soon as any federal statutes change. And to the point that it is not currently in effect, I saw something it's a screenshot of a title of a story about this. And it says, it's from Insider, it says, a 13-year-old who was raped by her grandfather had to travel hours across Texas to get an abortion. She wouldn't have been able to under the state's new 6-week ban. And then the person who was tweeting this said, remember when some of us said that the GOP wants us living in the world of the Handmaid's Tale and men told us that we were overreacting? Did this, which I think is like a little bit unfair to men. But it's this point of like children who are victims of stuff like this. I mean, and I know it's an extreme example. We shouldn't feel sympathy only when it's this most extreme, terrible example. But just to point out and emphasize that no one gets an exception to this. Children don't get an exception to this. Victims of rape and incest don't get an exception to this. It's so draconian. And it's so, and we say that the bill is as early as 6 weeks because that's typically when you see cardiac activity, but it's called a heartbeat bill for a reason. And I don't know why there is this emphasis on a heartbeat as a sign that this fetus is now important. It's not viable, and there's no scientific basis for like why that should be held as a more valuable like point along the pregnancy instead of viability. At least I haven't been able to find any good answer to that.
I think that the reason they say they do use that is because it's the first like sign that someone outside of the woman could put on this someone's pregnant, right? And Ohio passed this similar legislation, which was shot down, and they called it the heartbeat bill. And it's definitely designed to tug at people's heartstrings, to create a false narrative about, what's going on here, and to make people who are scientifically illiterate think that something's happening that isn't happening. Because in previous times when pregnancy was basically left to women and midwives, they would consider what they called the quickening, which is about 4 months, when you can feel the baby kick and move around, as a sign of, okay, this is, you're definitely got something going on here, versus previous before that. But I wanted to make a point to, I forget who it was, might have been Rabid Atheist. Somebody said, why are they focusing on abortion only rather than contraception and sex education? And this is my opinion, but I think that part of the reason they focus so much on that is, it's, without saying it, they want to punish women who have sex outside of a religiously prescribed box, which is marriage, and the punishment is the baby. That's what it seems like. So rather than prevent people from getting pregnant, no, you have to either abstain, which is our rule, being the religious people. You have to follow our dogma. And if you don't, your punishment for that is you are forced to have a baby you don't want or can't take care of, or anything like that. Now, in the case of incest or rape or terrible things like that, then it truly becomes a punishment for innocent victims. And so why they're not focusing on those things is they don't fit into the religious narrative about that. Because if you talk about contraception, then you have to acknowledge that people actually do things outside of your dogma. So they're constantly trying to make the world conform to them. And if they really care about women and children and families, they would be on the streets of the Capitol demanding free contraception. But that's not what they care about. They care about women keeping their legs closed, men and women following the rules, and if you don't, you get punished with a baby.
Wow, Rivka is spitting fire today.
I'm gonna highlight something in the article. Where is it? Where was it? Actually, let me just...
What are you thinking of?
Here. Oh, there it is. Can you read this part?
Yes, during a signing ceremony with an anti-abortion rights activist, so that would be a pro-life activist.
Anti-choice. Don't say pro-life. Don't let them own that they love. So,
Let's just read the paragraph.
Okay. During a signing ceremony with an anti-abortion rights activist, Abbott, a Republican, cheered the bill, saying, "Our Creator endowed us with the right to life, and yet millions of children lose their right to life every year because of abortion."
So look at this language. I just want to highlight you. I mean, I know we say this often, but this is supposed to be the most advanced country in the world. And you have the politicians openly, like without any, they don't even hide it. The fact that religion has such a major influence in what laws are being made, they're completely open about this, right? I mean, this is supposed to be a secular country, and look at the religious language they use behind the motivations that they have when it comes to passing their laws. Like such archaic, backwards ideas from like from antiquity and before, actually, actually from the Bronze Ages, are being used into passing laws in the 21st century, and they don't even hide the fact that that's what their motivation is. Like how is it that these ideas are still like it's so hard for me to believe that we're actually like sending, I don't know, we have managed to figure out what happened after like a fraction of a second after the beginning of this universe. We have technology that we could that we have used to determine that, and yet in the most technologically and scientifically advanced country on this planet, the most powerful lawmakers are looking at text that was written by people that had no idea how anything works, how the woman body works, how science works, how the universe works, how society works. Their advice and their guidelines of what should the world be like, that is the text that is being referred to for these lawmakers in this country to come up with their standards. It's unbelievable. And this is a country that's supposed to be setting a standard for the rest of the world on secularism.
I agree with you, Armin. And I also want to make one more point, is that you were talking about these ideas that are, thousands of years old, but up until very recently, almost the modern age, these religious people did not concern themselves with what happened with women's bodies. That was a realm that was left to women and midwives. It wasn't, you didn't see any discussion about that at all. Once the baby was born, it belonged to the father. But what happened before that was only the realm of women, and thus not worth discussing. Did not matter. The people who dealt with it were midwives, which were women. So it doesn't even figure into the thought process of a lot of these people from hundreds and hundreds of years ago.
All facts.
Yeah. I mean, by the way, I do want them to be open about their motivations behind making these laws, because I do want that to be used as evidence for maybe one day when Freedom from Religion Foundation and other secular organizations in the US become more powerful. These are all documented as evidence. I wish they had more power. By the way, guys, if you're Americans, maybe like consider supporting organizations like Freedom from Religion Foundation, so that they could stand between these politicians and your rights, right? These are the guardians that you need to support if you care about your rights, right? Anyways, do we need to highlight anything else? By the way, Rivka, so many compliments about your takes in the live chat.
I was highlighting them. Don't worry.
Yeah.
I made sure that she saw.
I did. You could see my eyes. I was like,
All right.
Hey guys, if you're a fan of Blasphemy and Sexy Callie, like me, then you need to be sure to subscribe to our newsletter, link in the description below. Because if you subscribe, we will send you a free copy of our Blasphemous Art ebook. And let me tell you, it is the tastiest blasphemy that you can find anywhere available today. And we are so generous with our blasphemy that we continue to send you more blasphemy every week. So make sure to subscribe, link in the description below.